Happy New Year, everyone! That's right, I know what month it is, and I can think of no better way to kick off another year than by dragging something from the last one back into the limelight. Although, let's be honest, I'm not really doing much dragging considering that the entire world has already tuned in to catch it. It might surprise you to know, dear viewer, that beneath all the complaining and offensive humor, I'm actually a pretty optimistic person. As far as I'm concerned, it's not about how you start, but rather how you finish, and I would like to think that anything can snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat no matter how crappy a start it got off to. Thankfully, Season 5 of Stranger Things didn't even get off to that rocky of a beginning. I mean, don't mishear me, it definitely had issues, but I held out hope that the Duffer Brothers would be able to have the competence to course correct. I already reviewed the first 4 episodes in a prior video. I'm assuming you've seen them by this point, so you can count this as your one and only spoiler warning for those, but I'll try to keep it brief and contained to the start for the last handful until the prediction segment. Today, no less than a week after the release of 3 out of 4, I'll be covering the final 4 episodes of Stranger Things and whether they serve as a fitting end to the season and the whole show. Grab your monster killing gear and settle in. We pick up at the end of episode 4. Eleven and Hopper have just busted 8 out of the government lab in the Upside Down and are trying to escape while Steve, Dustin, Jonathan, and Nancy attempt the same on the other side of the Upside Down. Will has just torn some Demogorgons to pieces to save his friends and family, prompting those in Hawkins to figure out what Will's new powers could mean and what he can now do. And of course, Holly and Max are trying to escape Vecna's mind before he achieves his goals and kills all the children he's trapped into helping him carry out his work. None of this is going to be easy. 11 learns from 8 the horrifying reason the scientists are hunting her, which forces her to make an impossible decision. Meanwhile, the other quartet trapped in the Upside Down is not only fractured metaphorically, but now literally. Also, they're finding weirder and weirder things. You were expecting a Stranger Things joke, weren't you? Back in our reality, Will realizes that his powers have strong ties to Vecna's. This lets him see what's been happening with Holly and Max, and with Vecna getting wise to the two girls' plot, he starts playing dirty. How will all this end, you ask? Do Max and Holly escape Vecna's mind? Can Will learn to use his powers in time for them to be helpful? Do the heroes reunite and save not only Hawkins, but reality itself? Will anybody ever get a decent haircut? For those answers, you'll have to watch and find out. What I can do is tell you whether that would be a good idea. To start with, I think it'd be good to acknowledge that Season 5 has the difficult job of tying up 4 very different seasons into one satisfying conclusion. Like I said in my review of the first part of the season, Stranger Things is difficult just to analyze because it's so different from one season to the next. It must have been an even greater challenge to bring them all together as a writer. Of course, my sympathy is limited, seeing as it's been the same people at the helm of this show since 2015, but whatever. Season 5 is being judged not just for its own merits, but how it treats everything that came before. And it should be. I've had it up to here with the meh endings. With that in mind, let's get into the thick of it, shall we? In my last video, I said that the characters were a mixed bag, and, well, my opinion hasn't changed all that much. I will die on the hill that Mike is the worst character, with Jonathan being a close second, but at least Jonathan and Nancy experienced some kind of growth at the end of the 6th episode. Almost everybody else followed in the same steps they've been walking in for the entire show, good and bad. I couldn't give a rat's tail about Dr. K or the military right up through the finale, so points for consistency, I guess. But not for story value. By now, the whole evil government agency thing has run its course. It feels like an over-involved side quest, and to be honest, it detracts from much more important things that should have been given more attention. Maybe this wouldn't have been so obvious if the people we saw running it had an ounce of charisma. Instead, the showrunners gave us a woman whose one and only personality trait is Capture 11.
Not a great plan.
2 characters, however, came out of nowhere to surprise me in the best way. Holly Wheeler, of all people in the show, experienced more development in one season than anybody else in her whole family did across 5, and I honestly believe that she's one of the most capable members in the bunch. I won't lie, that's at least a little funny considering that she's supposed to be 7 years old. This is helped along by Nell Fisher giving a comparatively grounded performance, proving once and for all that Linda Hamilton had to have been phoning it in on purpose. What happened to you, Linda? The other character to pull it together was, if you can believe it, Will Byers. I guess the writers got tired of having him stand in the corner all the time, because for these episodes, Will has had his priorities in clear order and a fire lit under him to deal with them even when there's personal risk involved. How about that? When a little sibling side character and a walking MacGuffin become the best parts of the show, things really have turned upside down. I'll see myself out. The bigger thing is how any of this would affect the plot. If you're like me, you've been wondering what's been going on with Dustin this season. Yeah, clearly something about Eddie, but how would that get resolved? And was he planning to stop being such a jerk to Steve? I'm happy to report that this drama does have a destination. In fact, for the most part, the show is pretty okay about providing answers to long-standing questions and resolving newer story threads. Whether they're good answers is another beast, but I'll leave that for you to determine. Mostly. I have to dock points for resurrecting 8 because it's a top 10 pet peeve of mine when writers revive characters that died or were written out a long time ago, not to mention a big time writing no-no. She brings nothing to the table except an info dump about why she was captured in the first place, which conveniently is precisely what Eleven needed to know to be presented with her choice. I appreciate the writers finally trying to give Eleven actual struggles, but this was just a little too obviously the hand of the author for my tastes. As I said earlier, Season 5 does its best to wrap up everything in the series, which is good in theory, but it often devolves into key jangling and member berries. Almost every living character made an appearance, there were way too many unnecessary callbacks or flashbacks to things we'd already seen, and at times the script even said screw it and brought back something that had already been settled, like Hopper laying his daughter's memory to rest. It's shameless fan service, and maybe less critical audiences did appreciate it, but it sure damaged the proficiency of the writing. My biggest problem with the season, however, is that it was just too busy for its own good. For example, there was a massive paradigm altering revelation about the Upside Down that went absolutely nowhere. By all accounts, it should have been a game changer for our heroes. They even set it up like it's going to be. Unfortunately, for reasons already discussed, the finale was so crowded that this reveal and the whopping 2 scenes of follow up got lost in the shuffle right along with all those loose ends you're not meant to think about. Like the military operations. Why did they just pack out a Hawkins? I mean, these people know classified stuff, and they've killed at least dozens of military personnel. Shouldn't there be at least a little follow up there? Whatever, don't think about it too hard. As for the ending, actually, I should say endings because this thing has more than Return of the King. See what I mean about too busy? I'm not kidding when I say that the Where Are They Now section takes 45 minutes. Remember when stories ended with 1 or 2 powerful wrap up scenes? That was nice, wasn't it? Nevertheless, I suppose the epilogue does its job pretty well, closing the book on the heroes with a refreshing degree of finality that I wouldn't have expected from a show this big in the current landscape. Here, now, at the end of it all, 1 decade, 5 seasons, countless delays, rewrites, and reshoots, and an absurd number of fan theories later, there must be a final judgment for Stranger Things. Did they stick the landing? Well, more or less. The plot totally imploded in the last episode, and the final battle was plain silly, but it did enough to balance the characters out in my book. Look, it has problems, but the ending we got is better than I expected it to be, and I'm counting that as a win. Stranger Things has been a rocky path, sure, but they got there in the end. Minus, of course, the unanswered questions about what the military's up to now that Eleven's gone and why they just left Hawkins without a fight, but, don't think about it too hard. Also, the questions about Eleven's future. And about, you know what, there's going to be a spin-off at some point, that's just unavoidable. All in all, I'd say it's a pretty middle of the road finale. You know what though, it doesn't even matter what I think, because if you've made it 4.5 seasons deep into this thing, you're probably gonna finish it no matter what. I did. The only thing left to do is look back at my own predictions and see how they stack up against what ended up happening. This, by the way, is where I spoil the living daylight out of everything, so turn back now if you're one of the 2 people on this planet that haven't finished it yet. Looking back at my predictions from the last video, I can say pretty confidently that I was wrong about most of it. I did, however, get a few things right that I will be clinging to until the end of time. Jonathan and Steve did, in fact, settle their differences, which is good because if I had to listen to them argue about Nancy one more time, I was going to throw a shoe through my TV. I think it's fair to say that the gang also brought all their friends and family in on the fight, albeit not always by choice, and they definitely got back to quote-unquote normal after the events of the final battle. I guess you could say that 8 and Will helped 11 win the fight against Vecna in the Upside Down, but that just doesn't feel right to me. 8's entire contribution was convincing 11 to commit suicide and shielding the kids for all of 0.5 seconds. At least Will got to be part of the action. I'll tell you what didn't happen though. Anything with the military. After 11 quote-unquote died, they just kinda packed up and shipped out. Yeah, right. Mark my words now, dear viewer. If there's a spin-off, it will be about dealing with a new startup government project that's using the remnants of the Hawkins affair to journey once again into the world of the bizarre, the weird, and the, well, strange. Point of all this being, there was a Barb callback! Ha!